Now moving along to the agenda for today. So first up, we're going to just do some introductions as to who I am and who Green Energy Consumers Alliance is. Then we will get into some heat pump basics. We will dive into costs and Rhode Island specific incentives. So this is a Rhode Island specific webinar today. If you are in Massachusetts, we did have a Massachusetts specific webinar on Tuesday, and that recording is on YouTube if you are interested in Massachusetts incentives. And then we'll also be getting into design considerations, and then we will open it up for questions at the end. So about Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we are a nonprofit organization based in both Boston, Massachusetts and Providence, Rhode Island. And our mission is to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. And we are very consumer focused and all about empowering consumers and communities to speed that just transition as well. And we are a nonprofit, and we were founded in 1982. So now getting into some heat pump basics. So as I said before during our mission statement, we are very consumer focused, and we are very focused on this big transition that is moving our heating systems away from fossil fuel combustion to cleaner electric heating systems. And as part of that, we want to help consumers find trusted vendors and sound advice, and really push the whole heat pump industry to be better by educating consumers. And so you can learn more about our work and heat pumps on our website at greenenergyconsumers.org/heat pumps. So what is a heat pump? A heat pump actually uses the same technology that you likely already have in your home, either an air conditioner or a refrigerator. And a refrigerant is the key operator that is used in all of these systems. Refrigerant is a highly temperature sensitive fluid or gas, depending on which state it is in. And it can absorb heat out of temperatures as low as -50 degrees. And it can also generate heat as high as temperatures up to 120 degrees, and that's Fahrenheit. With a heat pump, it is like a refrigerator or an air conditioner, but it is running in reverse. So it can take heat out of your house, or it can put heat into your house. So it can toggle between both heating and cooling. And it's just like these water pumps that you can see in this picture, in that a water pump does not create water. It simply moves water from one place to another. That is exactly what a heat pump does. It basically captures the heat in the refrigerant liquid or gas, and then it pumps that refrigerant to another place and then releases the heat to that new location. And that is how a heat pump can achieve efficiencies greater than 100%, because again, it's just moving heat rather than generating it, whereas fossil fuel-based systems have to actually generate the heat. Now, you may have heard that heat pumps are not efficient down to very cold temperatures. And while that was true in the past, it is not true in the present. So heat pump technology has significantly improved in recent years. We now have cold climate heat pump technology that can efficiently produce heat down to -17 degrees Fahrenheit. And there are many people in many cold climate states and countries that have completely replaced their fossil fuel heating systems with heat pumps because they are so efficient down to these cold temperatures. As an example, Maine, one of our coldest states in the nation, has a very high adoption rate for heat pumps. And heat pumps can come in various different forms. There are ducted and ductless heat pumps. And so ductless heat pumps distribute heat, or I'm sorry, ducted heat pumps distribute heat through existing ductwork, whereas ductless is depicted in this image where there is no duct, there's just a wire connected to the outside unit and the inside unit. There's also whole home and partial home heat pumps. And so you can choose to only convert part of your home to heat pumps, or you can convert your entire home. And then there's air source heat pumps, which take heat out of the air, whereas ground source heat pumps take heat from the ground. All right. Now to get into the different ductless indoor variations. There are three types of indoor units, and they're also known as heads. The first is a wall hung unit. This is the most common type of heat pump unit, ductless unit. And this can easily be hung on exterior walls without any furniture blocking the way, and it allows technicians easy access to the unit. The second type is a floor mount unit. This looks a little bit more like a floor radiator, at least in where it would sit, down closer to the floor. And these are becoming increasingly popular and are a great alternative to the wall hung units, particularly for first floor heating. And with these ones, the refrigerant line can come in easily through the basement, so it can be more easily placed in the middle of the home, whereas wall hung units typically have to be on the exterior walls of the home. And then the last type is a ceiling cassette. This is mounted on your ceiling, and most often this is installed from above, from an attic. And ceiling cassettes are a bit of a newer product, and they do a better job of fitting between joists in the ceiling compared to earlier versions. And the heat pump industry is constantly evolving, and there are always new options coming out to really focus on making installation very practical and easy for the home. Now focusing on the outside part of a heat pump. This is also known as the condenser. And basically the condenser has a large fan, and so it needs to be able to have a free flow of air. It also must be off the ground to prevent ice buildup in the winter due to snow and ice in the winter causing or essentially blocking airflow. So it does need to stand up off of the ground. And the condenser needs to be close to the house for electricity, as well as to run the refrigerant line outside the house to wherever the inside head is located within the home. And the smaller condensers are roughly a foot thick and 2 feet high by 3 feet wide. And the larger condensers, which is pictured here in this image, is for a whole home heat pump system. So why are we so focused on educating people about heat pumps? And why are there so many incentives out there for heat pumps? And the answer is really about shifting our heating from fossil fuels to green-powered electricity, because that is essential to meet our climate goals. And so this chart here, this is from a 2021 data set from the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. And here you can see a comparison of the greenhouse gas emissions from heat pumps versus other sources of heating. And you'll see that there are much fewer greenhouse gases emitted by air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps compared to oil, propane, natural gas, and electric baseboard heating. And so you'll note that both electric baseboard and heat pumps run on electricity, but heat pumps are way more efficient. And that is because they're using much less electricity because they're so efficient, and thus they're creating much less greenhouse gases than electric baseboard heating does. And the good news is that as the electricity becomes even cleaner, in Rhode Island, we have a 100% renewable energy standard that requires 100% of our electricity by 2033 to come from renewable sources. basically that's going to make heat pumps zero emissions over time. Whereas you can see that oil, propane, and natural gas will still produce emissions even if the grid is at 100% renewable energy. And so that is why the states and utility companies are incentivizing heat pump conversions. This is practically the only way that we are going to reduce emissions from residential heating. Now to get into the costs and incentives of heat pumps. So when you're considering a switch to heat pumps, there are two key costs to keep in mind. There's the installation cost, so the upfront cost of installing the system, and then there are operating costs, the cost of operating the system. For installation costs, a very rough ballpark estimate for a single head ductless system after incentives is around $6,000 to $10,000 per system. And then for a whole home ducted system, you'd be looking at somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000. And that can actually, it can possibly be even more than that if you have a home with, very tall cathedral ceilings, or if you have many bedrooms, the cost can sometimes be even more than $25,000. Now, again, this is a rough ballpark, and you really need to have a technician come out to your house to actually find out the cost to install a heat pump in your home specifically, as every home is different and every home is going to have different costs. In addition to the cost of the actual heat pump system, a lot of people also need to upgrade their electrical service when installing a heat pump. You likely will need a 200 amp electrical service. And we have seen quotes for that upgrade come in between $6,000 and $9,000. Now, this probably does seem like an overwhelming amount of money up front. So we did want to mention that Rhode Island does have the Rhode Island Heat Loan Program, where qualified Rhode Island Energy customers can receive 0% financing to install qualified high efficiency heating and cooling upgrades in their homes. And that includes heat pump installations. And this link on this slide is active. So when you do get these slides, feel free to click on that for more information about that Rhode Island heat loan. Now, to offset the installation costs, in addition to help from the heat loan, there are federal tax credits thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. So for heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, there is a post incentive of 30% of the cost of the system, up to $2,000. And for electrical upgrades, there is a $600 credit. And you can claim up to a total of $3,200 in credits per year. And so you can do a combination of these things. But one thing I will note is you cannot claim $2,000 for a heat pump and $2,000 for a heat pump water heater in the same year. So there is no rollover. Say, 30% of your post-incentive cost is $6,000. You can't take $2,000 one year and then $2,000 the next year. You can just do it once. However, you can claim a new energy savings tax credit for a new piece of equipment every year for 10 years. So you can do a heat pump one year and a heat pump water heater the next year, for example. And again, this link is active to the Internal Revenue Service if you would like to learn more information about the heat pump tax credits. Now moving on to some other federally funded rebates that are available in Rhode Island specifically. So the Inflation Reduction Act allocated funds to two federally funded rebates. The first is called the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebates, or HERE is the acronym. And this program has actually launched in Rhode Island as of September of this year for the low income track, and the moderate income track is coming in 2025, which I will get more into exactly what that entails in the next slide. But essentially, this program is for point of sale rebates, primarily for electrification measures, and it is specifically limited to low and moderate income households. And Rhode Island was allocated almost $32 million for this program. Now, the second federally funded rebate through the Inflation Reduction Act is the Home Efficiency Rebate. The acronym is HER. And Rhode Island has submitted its application to the Department of Energy for this rebate. They're currently waiting for approval to actually get the funds to start distributing them in Rhode Island. But this is a point of sale rebate for energy efficiency improvements that achieve a minimum of 20% energy savings. And so Rhode Island, their proposal is public, although it has not been approved yet. It is available on their website if you are interested in learning more. But essentially what they have proposed through the HER program is to create a low-income multifamily heat pump incentive, offering up to $16,000 off per unit to install heat pumps in low-income multifamily units. So that we should be learning more about whether or not they got approval for that within the next few months. And they're looking to roll that out in 2025. But now going into what they did get approval for so far, the home electrification and appliance rebates. As I said, the low income rebate pathway launched in September of this year, and the moderate income pathway is coming in 2025. And essentially, this allows you to get rebates if you are low income of up to $4,000 for an electrical load service center, essentially an electrical panel upgrade, $2,500 for electrical wiring, and $1,840 for an electric stove or induction stove, as well as certified heat pump clothes dryers. And the moderate income rebate pathway will be coming in 2025, and that gives you $2,000 off of an electrical load service upgrade, $1,250 for electrical wiring, and $420 for a electric stove, induction stove, or a certified heat pump clothes dryer. And if you are looking to learn more about this program, we have linked to their website here. Again, we will be learning more about the moderate income rebate in 2025. And here, this just gives you an example of what qualifies as low and moderate income households. Again, only low and moderate income households can participate in the program, and the income thresholds are determined by area median income. And this table shows the low and moderate income thresholds for a family of 4 in Rhode Island as of this year. And again, for more information on income eligibility, you can visit the Office of Energy Resources Home Energy Rebates webpage, or you could also talk to your CAP agency, as the rebate is also going to be going through them as well. Now getting into the low-income incentives for heat pumps by fuel source. So again, low income for a 2-person household is a household that makes under $46,651, or you can qualify if you're already on LIHEAP, SNAP, or the A60 discount rate. And so if you have oil or propane heating now, which I believe some of you did say you are currently on oil, you would get an incentive through the state's Clean Heat Rhode Island program. And again, if you are income eligible, so if you are low income, you can get 100% of the cost of a heat pump installation covered. And the same thing for a heat pump water heater, it can be 100% covered. And then you can get up to $3,500 for an electrical panel upgrade. Now, if you have electric resistance heat, you can also get 100% of the heat pump installation cost covered, including weatherization. And I believe some of you did say you currently have electric resistance heating, but this is not through the state's Clean Heat Rhode Island program. This is through Rhode Island Energy's program. And again, that's if you are income eligible. Now, unfortunately, for gas heat, there is no low-income incentives to install a heat pump currently. And that is because the operating costs of a gas heating system is either comparable or sometimes a little bit less than the operating costs of a heat pump system. And so we want to be sure that if we're transitioning people who are low income to heat pumps, we are not increasing their operating costs and increasing their energy burden. So that is why there is not an installation incentive for gas heat conversions for low income at this moment. Now moving on to market rate incentives by fuel source. So market rate is a two-person household making greater than $46,651. And so if you are on oil, propane, or gas heat, you are eligible for an incentive both through either the state Clean Heat Rhode Island program and the utility program, and rebates can be combined. So you would be eligible for both the Clean Heat Rhode Island rebate and the rebate through Rhode Island Energy if they are your utility. If not, you would be able to access the Block Island Power or Pasco Utility District, depending on which one is your utility provider. Now, for air source heat pumps, you can get a Clean Heat Rhode Island discount of $750 off per ton. And then you can see, based on your specific utility provider, how much of an incentive you can get. They're pretty comparable across the three different utilities in Rhode Island. And then if you have a ground source heat pump or are converting to a ground source heat pump, you can get $1,250 off per ton. And for electric resistance heating, which some of you said you have, you can get an additional $1,250 off per ton for displacing electric resistance heating. But this again is going to be through Rhode Island Energy, not through the state's heat pump incentive program. Now, I do just want to call out the ground source heat pump system, which is less common than air source systems. There is a rebate through Clean Heat Rhode Island for $1,250 per ton, as I mentioned on the previous slide. But one thing to note with ground source systems is that they are more expensive to install. And that's because you will need to get a backhoe onto your property to actually dig and lay the refrigerant line down into the ground. However, they are more efficient than air source heat pumps. So if you do have the space, it is a good option as it will save you on operating costs due to its greater efficiency. Now moving on to heat pumps for water heaters. So heat pumps can also heat your water tank for showers, for your dishwasher, etc. And you probably currently heat your water now with either a boiler or an electric resistance tank. And if you heat with an electric tank, Rhode Island Energy offers a $600 rebate for replacing that tank with a heat pump water heater. And if you are replacing a gas, oil, or propane tank, Clean Heat Rhode Island, the state program, offers a $750 rebate to replace those systems with a heat pump water heater. And heat pump water heaters are 2 to 3 times more efficient than all other tank equipment, whether it's electric or fossil fuel based. And heat pump water heaters work by pulling heat out of the air that surrounds the tank. And due to this, they do need a large enough space to be able to do that. So they will need a space bigger than a small utility closet. So they often do have to go in your basement where you do have a bit more space. And one thing to note here is they do leave that space cooler and drier as a result of pulling in the heat from the surrounding air. And if it's in your basement, drier is probably a good thing for a basement. But if you do need heat in your basement, you would need to think about how to not, rob Peter to pay Paul and like take the heat out of the basement to heat your hot water. Another thing to note here is that they do require an electric hookup, and they also require a drain for the water vapor that condenses as the heat is pulled out of the air. So there is a great heat pump water heater cost calculator that I've linked here on the slide from Efficiency Maine, and that can help you figure out your operating costs if you do want to switch to a heat pump water heater. Now, we've talked a lot about the installation costs of heat pumps and what incentives are available to help mitigate those costs. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about the operating costs of heat pumps. So when you're transitioning to heat pumps, your electric usage will increase, while your gas, oil, or propane usage, whatever you had previously, will reduce. And so to compare heating costs, there are three things that are really important to look at. The first is weather, the second is the efficiency of the equipment, and the third is fuel costs. Now, first looking at weather, this is 10 years of heating season data from New England. And the x-axis shows the temperature, and the y-axis shows the hours of the heating season that you are at that temperature. And so we have roughly 2,000 hours at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and then roughly 2,500 at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So this means that for the majority of the winter, we in New England are in that 30 to 60 degree range. And then for about 20 to 30% of the winter, we are in those colder, below freezing temperatures. And at lower temps, heat pumps are less efficient, but they can still have greater efficiency down to negative 15 degrees than fossil fuel systems. Now, fortunately for us, we spend about 70 to 80% of our heating season at above freezing temperatures. So it will be very efficient for the majority of the winter. But if you, it's really important because we do live in New England and we do get below freezing temperatures. It is really important to get a cold climate heat pump for that 20 to 30% of winter where we are dealing with freezing temperatures. Now let's look at some of the fuel costs. So again, this chart on the left is pretty complicated, so we will take our time walking through it. But the gray area shows us the same weather data that we just talked about on the previous slide. And the black line shows us the oil cost. The blue line represents natural gas costs, and the green line represents the cost of an air source heat pump. And as you can see, for the majority of the winter, air source heat pumps are going to be the most cost effective of the different fuel types. But as we get into the colder temperatures, gas can become more efficient. Same thing with oil. Oil can also become more efficient than heat pumps as we get into the very cold temperatures. Each home is different, and each home's electricity and gas and propane And oil prices are going to be different. So we want to be sure that we're being very transparent about the cost assumptions that we've made here. You can think about, as they say with cars, your mileage may differ. And so same for your fuel costs. You may be paying a different fuel cost than what we've estimated here. And in this chart, we have estimated the average fuel price over an annual, over the past year. And so for propane, we are estimating $3.70 per gallon. For oil, we are estimating $3.55 per gallon. For heat pumps, we are estimating 26 cents per kilowatt hour. And for natural gas, we are estimating $2.28 per therm. And this is just, again, an average. So you do want to try and think about what you pay and consider that as your operating costs. One thing to note is, again, as this is an average, right now in the wintertime in Rhode Island, electricity costs and natural gas costs do both rise. And so right now, electricity costs in Rhode Island are around 34 cents per kilowatt hour, and natural gas costs are around $2.70 per therm. And so that would change this. So this just shows the annual estimate over a year. And I also want to make clear the efficiency that we assume for the air source heat pump equipment. The COP stands for the coefficient of performance, which is basically a measure of efficiency for heat pumps. And so for each 1 kilowatt of electricity you put into this heat pump, you're going to get 4.705 kilowatts of heat out of it. And so it's a tremendously efficient system, which is why it's so cost effective at these higher temps. So at 60 degrees, it is very cost effective. But you will see as the temperature decreases, it does become less efficient. So at negative 15 degrees, the COP jumps down to 1.95. But I do want to note that that is actually still a great COP. As if you think about a natural gas furnace, the highest that you're going to get is about 98%. So in this metric, it would be 0.98. And so the heat pump is still twice as efficient in terms of its optimization of fuel, even at this very cold temperature. And so that is why this is classified as a cold climate heat pump. So when you're looking at this slide and you're considering your fuel costs, we really encourage you to think about fuel costs now, the average, what it looks like, over the course of each month, and also what you think it's going to look like in the future, and really, have a long think about that, and then make your choice accordingly. Now moving into heat pump system design options. So we want to go back to the questions at the beginning and really think about your home. Does it have ductwork or is it ductless? And if you have ductwork, you have a furnace, not a boiler. And you probably have ducts in the floor, bringing you hot air throughout your home. And hot air ductwork is relatively easy to reuse for a heat pump. You would essentially have a heat pump condenser outside, and then you have an air handler in your basement using that same ductwork. It would transport the heat throughout your home. Now, you would need to make sure that the ductwork is in good condition and can handle cold air and hot air. You may also be able to use your central air conditioning ductwork for a heat pump. So if you have central air ductwork, that is also an option for a heat pump. But you really would need to get a technician out to examine if that ductwork is currently sized for cold air and if it is compatible with hot air. But I will say, if you are able to convert your central air conditioning ductwork into a heat pump, it's a really great option because you'd be replacing two pieces of equipment, both your central AC as well as your furnace with one. So it can definitely help save on upfront installation costs there. All right, now if your home lacks ductwork, AKA you don't have a furnace, you have a boiler or electric resistance heating, and you don't have central AC, there isn't an easy drop-in system as there is for ducted systems to replace your system with a heat pump. Heat pumps, unfortunately, don't produce water that is hot enough to match the heat that is currently produced by your boilers. Now, with that being said, if you do have a very well insulated home, you have a nice tight envelope, it actually is possible to replace your boiler with a heat pump because you don't need your radiator or your baseboard to get as hot thanks to that tight envelope. And another thing to note is that hydronic options are in development and may become available as soon as next year. So it's also something to keep an eye on as a potential option in the future. However, you could use a ductless or mini ducted system. And so that you can have a single head that can serve a larger open area, like a great room or an open floor living space. You can also have single zones or multi-zones, and you can have a mini ducted unit that can serve several small adjacent rooms. Say you have a small bedroom and a small office right next to each other. But one thing that we really want to stress here is that you always want to insulate first to save on operating costs by ensuring that you have a nice tight envelope for your home. Now let's talk about sizing your system. One thing that we want to really make clear here and warn you against is oversizing your system. And this has been a concern that has come up for people who have already installed their systems. So we want to make sure that you don't follow in their footsteps. So this example here, the heat load for this contemporary style image is 24,000 BTUs, or British thermal units, of heat per hour. And in this illustration, we've put one 24,000 BTU head in the main living area, this living room dining area. And this would produce enough heat to keep the house from freezing. It works similar to a wood stove, if you're familiar with that technology. However, there would be a noticeable difference between rooms. So for instance, these two back bedrooms would probably be colder than the main living area. Still comfortable, but you would definitely notice that they aren't as warm as the central living area. The bedrooms would also be slightly warmer in the winter, and this may be fine, in the summer. And this may be fine for you. For example, you could put ceiling fans in those bedrooms and end up being totally comfortable. So this is an option that could work for you. Or you could also only do a partial displacement of your fossil heating system. So you could have this heat pump, in the main area to heat the main area. And then you can move your thermostat down the hall or into the back bedrooms and set the heat pump lower. So that also is an option for you. Now, this is the sizing that we want to warn you about. Too many heads in a small space. So let's say that a contractor comes in and says, oh, your heat load is 24,000 BTUs, but you need a head in every room. So let's say they put in 4 heads at 9,000 BTUs in each room. And they basically say, yes, this gives you a maximum capacity of 26,000 BTUs, which is more than you need. But it's fine because you can just run them less. But you've now got 33% more heating load than what you need. And the problem with this is in the way in which heat pumps work. They are not designed to be turned on and off. That makes them very inefficient. Heat pumps are designed to run continuously. And so this system would definitely be very inefficient for your home. Additionally, in the summer, you would end up with cold and clammy air. And so this is because the dehumidification cycle takes longer than the cooling cycle. So the air will not be dehumidified, but it will be cold. So something to keep in mind. Overall, too many heads in a small space is going to be more expensive in terms of paying for more equipment than what you need. You would be paying for 4 individual heads. It's also more expensive to operate because it is less efficient. And the comfort level is not going to be there. So you definitely want to make sure that you avoid oversizing when you're looking at various heat pump designs. Now, a potential solution for small bedrooms that are adjacent to each other is a mini ducted system. And this is where you can put an air handler in the attic above or from the basement below. And you basically put tiny 3 to 6 foot ductwork into each room. And so in this illustration, you've got 12,000 BTUs that are split between the 2 bedrooms. So each room is getting 6,000 BTUs and is nice and comfortable. And these 2 heads can be connected to 2 separate condensers or 1 condenser. And generally, a condenser works most efficiently when it has fewer heads on it. But you can put up to 4 or so heads per condenser. And heads can be up to 150 feet away from each condenser. And then, while you have this mini ducted system for the bedrooms, you still have this main system with 12,000 BTUs for the main living area as well. So every part of the home is nice and comfortable and heated and cooled. Now, as a next step, we highly recommend the no-cost virtual independent consultations that you can book with both Clean Heat Rhode Island, the state of Rhode Island's Office of Energy Resources program, as well as with Energy Sage. And when you're getting quotes, we recommend that you get up to 3 quotes. And I know that probably sounds like it'll be very time consuming, but we really think it will pay off. And, when you're looking at heat pumps, you're looking at potentially spending tens of thousands of dollars. And as we talked about today, heat pump configurations can be pretty varied. And you can get contractors recommending various different designs to you. So you really want to dive in and try to understand what is best for your home by getting multiple quotes. And those quotes can probably seem daunting if you're just looking at them by yourself. So thankfully, Clean Heat Rhode Island actually has an awesome quote comparison tool where you can get side-by-side comparisons of the 3 quotes. They will offer you independent feedback. So they can explain, oh, this one has higher efficiency equipment. That's why they're, proposing a more expensive installation costs, but because it is more efficient, your operating costs are going to be lower compared to, this other quote where, the upfront cost costs look like it's going to be less expensive, but that's because it's a less efficient system. And so your operating costs will actually be higher. So this is a really helpful tool, game changer for consumers, and really will offer you clear explanations of what can oftentimes be pretty technical information. And we just wanted to close out by giving you 3 questions that we think are really important to ask heat pump installers. The first is your company one of the approved installers for my state or utility heat pump rebate program? So both Clean Heat Rhode Island and Rhode Island Energy have a list of approved installers on their website. And you want to make sure that in order to get the rebate, you are using their approved installers. The second question is, will you formally calculate my heat load before I sign a contract to purchase specific pieces of equipment? And so this is important. This is something that most heat pump installers will do for you up front. It's called a J-load calculation. And it's just something that you want to make sure that they do before you are signing anything and agreeing to anything. And then the last question is the equipment you're recommending eligible for the state/municipal rebate? There is some equipment out there that is not eligible, so you do want to make sure that you're ensuring you're getting equipment that you can get a discount on. All right, now I think we're going to move to questions in just a minute, but before we do that, I do want to mention we have a lot of upcoming events. We do a lot of educational webinars, not just on heat pumps, but also on solar. So we are having a Ask a Solar Expert Rhode Island specific session on Monday, November 18th at 7 p.m. And again, that is Rhode Island specific. And then we will also be having a Massachusetts specific one as well. And then on Tuesday, December 3rd, we are going to be having a webinar that we're calling Driving Through Winter Wonderland. It'll be all about electric vehicles in the wintertime. Now, as a reminder, we are a nonprofit organization. So if you feel so inclined to donate, we would greatly appreciate it. It does help us continue to host webinars like this and continue with our various clean energy and green energy programs. And then we also do have an advocacy department where we advocate for climate policy in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island that makes it easier to adopt technology like heat pumps. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions. So let me see if we have any questions in the Q&A. All right, let's see. So Bart is asking, what incentives are available for an air-to-water heat pump? So Bart, I don't believe there are any incentives in Rhode Island currently for an air-to-water heat pump. I think that is newer technology that is just starting to become available. And so I don't believe there are incentives currently, but hopefully there will be more coming, and we will definitely keep you posted about that. Let's see. I have recently installed 4 heat pumps into my house and auxiliary building. Are there any tax or other incentive benefits in Rhode Island and or at the federal level? These pumps are already installed. So I don't believe that the incentives can be used retroactively. I also, you would have to, it's unclear if they were eligible based on, which equipment you used. So that's something that you would have to look into beforehand. So unfortunately, I don't believe they are, you would be eligible for any heat pump incentives if they're already installed. And then let's see. The heat pump, John commented that the heat pump water heater slide showed 240-volt circuits as a requirement, but manufacturers are increasingly offering 120-volt models. That is a great point. We can definitely update that slide accordingly. That's great to hear because we don't want to have to always have people increasing their electrical panel or upgrading their electrical panel in order to install these systems. So thanks for that comment, John. Let's see, I think we have a couple more questions coming in. How long will the low income installation grant last? What is the procedure to apply and install? So thanks for that question. It depends on what program you're talking about. So the Clean Heat Rhode Island program doesn't have an end date. They're looking to continue it for a long time, but it honestly depends on when funding runs out. Although I will say that they have told me that they are actively looking for additional funding sources to be able to continue the program long term. And then for the HER program, the programs that are federally funded, those are going to be available either until the money runs out or until 2031, whichever happens first. And then as far as the procedure to apply and install, if you are going through the Clean Heat Rhode Island program, so if you have if you have oil or propane heat, you would go through the Clean Heat Rhode Island website, which is the State Office of Energy Resources program. And again, that is linked in the slide, so you will get that when we send it out. If you have electric resistance heat, you would go through Rhode Island Energy. So you can either visit the Rhode Island Energy's website, or I believe you can also access that utility incentive through your community action program or your CAP agency. So we also recommend reaching out to them as well. And the HERE program, the program that is federally funded from the Inflation Reduction Act, that is also going to be through your CAP agency. So if you're interested in those incentives for electrical panel upgrades, electrical wiring, a induction stove, things like that, you can visit their website or go or call your CAP agency to learn about how to access that incentive. Let's see. All right, I'm actually getting a comment from my colleague Loie, who is our heat pump expert, and she is saying that for incentives for already installed heat pump systems, there is a chance that you'll be able to claim the federal tax credit when you file your taxes. And she also said to check with Clean Heat Rhode Island about whether you're still within the window to apply for that incentive. So it sounds like you may still have a chance if you already installed your system. So that's good to know. Thank you, Loie. So we're getting a question from Karen. She says, I have a Rhode hot water on demand water system in coordination with my Rhode high efficiency boiler system. Is the hot water on demand option the most energy efficient compared to the heat pump water heater? I'll follow up with you on the exact answer to that, but my understanding is that a heat pump hot water system is the most efficient system. If your system is still connected to a boiler, even though it is a highly efficient boiler, I believe the heat pump is still going to be more efficient than that. So I hope that answers your question. And we have 2 more minutes, so I'm happy to take any more questions if there are any more. And again, if you have more questions, feel free to contact me, Amanda@greenenergyconsumers.org, and I will get back to you. And we will also be sending out these slides along with some resources to help answer everyone's questions. So I will just hang on for one more minute. So we're getting a question about resources in Rhode Island for finding electricians experienced in heat pump related work. So I think the best resource for you there is going to be the Clean Heat Rhode Island program's website. They have a list of qualified installers that should be able to should be experienced with both heat pump technology as well as aware of the rebates and able to let you know what systems are eligible for the rebates. So I recommend starting there. All right. Well, with that, I will conclude this webinar. Really appreciate everyone's time. And again, we will be sending out the recording and the slides so that you can have those as a resource. Thanks, everyone. Take care.